So first, I would like to say thank you to Tulane University and Tulane Library for inviting me back for a second year. This is our second Essence Book Project interview, and thank you, Bernice, for agreeing to be interviewed. I am Jacinta Saffold. I have a project that is based on a bestsellers list that was published in in Essence magazine from 1994 to 2010. The magazine polled Black-owned bookstores across the United States and Canada for sales data to compile a list. And Bernice McFadden is one of the all-stars of that list. And so I'm really excited to have her here and for us to celebrate her new memoir, Firstborn Girls.
Thank you.
So let's get started with my first question to you. In the author notes of Loving Donovan, you write, "To my readers, thank you for your continued support. Please keep your emails and letters coming. They are a constant source of joy for me." Have any of these emails, letters, and now digital and social media messages you've received led to any memorable experiences? And how does this kind of community with your readers affect your writing?
So obviously, even if I didn't have readers, I would write, but it doesn't mean I would sell books. So I very much appreciate my readers. Memorable experiences, I think that's more recent, right? With social media, with Instagram. In fact, there was a young lady who flew in from Atlanta today that I met, and we follow each other on social media, and it's almost like you already know these people, and then when you see them, it's like, oh, it's like family. So my readers are so important to me, and I always want to be accessible to them because they mean so much to me.
That is really awesome. I love that. So my next question is, I would like for you to tell us about how you came to the title, Firstborn Girls, and why did you decide that right now was the time to write your memoir?
So I started a blog many, many years ago called Firstborn Girls, right? I'm a firstborn girl. My mother's a firstborn girl. My grandmother's a firstborn girl. And it's the same lineup on the paternal side of my family. When I decided I was ready to write a memoir, it was actually, the memoir was supposed to come out a few years ago.
Okay.
So it was just the universe that stepped in because this is the prime time for it to have been published. But I was really concerned about my descendants, about legacy, and I wrote the book primarily for them and for myself. I'm glad you all get to participate. But yeah, that's why I decided to write the memoir, because I wanted to leave behind all of these stories, these family stories that I have. I didn't want them to die with my mother and die with me.
That's really awesome. I love that. And we'll get to that. I have a question about that, a follow-up in a few questions. But right now I want to focus on the 3 books that were ranked on the bestsellers list published in Essence magazine that you wrote. They include your debut novel, Sugar, This Bitter Earth, and that one was actually ranked in the #1 position for fiction hardcover in June 2002. And then you also have the complicated romance novel that you wrote, Loving Donovan. All of your Essence bestselling titles and now your new memoir, Firstborn Girls, have all been published by Dutton. How has it been working with the same press throughout your career? And is there anything in particular Dutton has done to keep you willing to work with them over the years?
So here, I was with Dutton from 2000 until 2008, I believe, and then I went to a small press for a few years. So I broke away from Dutton for about a decade. So it's very nice to circle back, right? To publish this memoir with the publisher who published my first book. I will say this time around they've been very supportive.
That's great.
And not to say that they weren't in the beginning. It's business, right? It's business. So Yeah, we're back in love again.
Okay. we make up. So let me ask you, do you remember if being an Essence bestseller selling author had any impact on your career? And what do you think today's aspiring authors gain and or lose by not having a list dedicated specifically to Black authorship and their readers?
Yeah, sometimes we fight. The things that we fight for don't always serve us. So, like integration. If Black readers just want to read books that are written by people who look like them, and read stories populated by people who look like them and share their experiences, they should be able to do that, I think, as easily as non-Black people, right? So back in the late 90s and early 2000s, obviously we had Essence. So every month I'd pick up the magazine and go to the bestsellers list and be like, oh, these are the bestsellers. So I could go straight to the bookstore. And of course we also had I think it was called the African American Interest section. You correct me if I'm wrong. But people were like, I want to, I want to be read by everyone, and I want to be read by everyone. But it was just easier for us to be found by people who primarily wanted to read literature by Black writers.
Right.
So I think it was just like, it was a good thing, and it's a double-edged sword.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Because I want to be read by everyone, but I know who I'm writing to directly, which does not mean that you can't find, that you won't, if you're not Black, you won't be able to find my material relatable, because books should be mirror and window. And I think my books are a mirror and window.
I really like that, mirror and window. Yeah. That's a conundrum, I think, that we have been fighting against, the kind of visibility that happens when authors are put kind of clumped together so that people can find them very easily. But then it also becomes a kind of segregating kind of piece, and that's a bit of a thing, and I don't know that we've had an answer. And so hopefully we'll have a return like you had with Dutton.
Yeah.
We'll see. So I just want to bring everyone's attention to the fact that you are an assistant professor of creative writing here at Tulane University. As a fellow assistant professor in English literature, I am in awe of how you are doing all of the things. And with such style and grace.
Oh, thank you. What things are you speaking of?
All of them. How has teaching affected your writing?
I think it has enhanced it, because I'm interested in the myriad of ways a story can be told, one story, right? And obviously I have to keep things interesting and exciting in the classroom. So while I'm searching for those things to keep the kids interested, I'm also discovering different genres for myself. I was like, oh, I could tell this one particular story as, a piece of fiction. I can also tell it as a piece of creative nonfiction, lyric essay, hermit crab essay. And so it serves me.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it serves me.
Yes, I can say I am a former professor at the University of New Orleans, and it was my first time teaching creative writing students, but I was teaching them literature.
Oh,
and
okay.
I learned so much from them, so much from them, and I'm immensely grateful. I was a little intimidated by poetry, but then my students summarily gathered me, and now I am editing a poetry collection.
Oh, congratulations. Wow.
So I love our students. They're awesome.
Yeah, I tell them it's an exchange, right?
Right.
I don't know everything, you don't know everything, but we could come together in the middle.
Yes, absolutely. Would you guys love to hear a passage from Bernice from the book? Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, wait a minute, my mouth is dry. I don't want to gag. And I'm not going to read anything heavy. I'm going to read this very funny section. What's the setup? It's my mother and her cousin are little girls. They're living with my aunt and my grandmother. And my aunt is in a relationship with this man. The sisters took to taking day trips up to Saratoga Springs to watch the horse races. It was there that she caught the eye of a jockey named Benny. When Thelma saw the heat between them, she smirked. He ain't much taller than me. My grandmother was 4'11". While Thelma was petite, save for her buxom bosom, Anna was taller with wide hips and thick legs. She had a penchant for small, delicately framed men, or maybe they had a penchant for her. She and her men always looked like the physical manifestation of the number 10. She and Benny became an item, and before long, he was spending his off days in Brooklyn with her. For a while, it was heaven, and then one night, after too many drinks, he hit her and unleashed hell. Vivian and Peggy, who were in the living room at the time, scrambled to the kitchen for safety. From there, they watched Anna transform into a welterweight wrestler. After he hit her, Anna grabbed Benny by the throat, lifted him off the couch, and shook him like a rag doll. His limbs were still flapping when she slammed him face down on the floor. Dazed, he twisted his head around on his neck and gazed up at her in disbelief. He opened his mouth to speak, but she was on him again. After a few cuffs to his head, Anna took hold of his collar with one hand. The other she hooked into the waistband of his trousers, hauled him up from the floor, and heaved him onto that expensive-looking glass and mahogany coffee table. The impact sent shards of glass everywhere. That's the first time Peggy and Vivian ever saw a man cry. Did he call the cops? I asked after hearing the story for the first time. Did you? Vivian laughed, which is black speak for hell no. Afterward, Anna patched his lacerations and they crawled into bed together. The next day he left and never came back. When I first heard this story, I found it unbelievable because Anna was the gentlest, kindest, most generous and loving person I knew. I'd seen her frustrated, peeved even, but never enraged. While her temper was a mystery to me, it was legendary with other family members and people who lived in the Brookline housing projects. Her daughter Peggy was just 16 when she gave birth to her first son, Wayne. Earl Moe came the following year, and James in 1966 when she was 19 years old. There was a fourth boy named Benjamin, whom Anna took in and raised as her own when his mother couldn't. This quartet of boys were affectionately dubbed Miss Rose's boys, and woe to the person who ever brought harm to any one of them. The man who owned the corner store learned that the hard way. One afternoon, Anna decided to make one of her famous 6-layered coconut cakes. She had all the ingredients, but was low on flour, and so sent James across the street to get a fresh pack. The store owner knew James. In fact, he was well acquainted with the entire family, so why he got it in him to slap James simply because he'd made direct eye contact with him remains unanswered. Eyes tearing, James ran home holding his stinging cheek. "What happened to you, and where's my flour?" Anna asked over the large mixing bowl. He slapped me," James said, sniveling. Anna's brown eyes turned black. "He who?" she growled. "The man at the store." Anna pulled herself up from the table, throwing her tweed coat over her house dress. She didn't bother to put on shoes. She just beelined it out of the apartment in her slippers. It was late October, chilly but not freezing. Anna tramped across fallen leaves, crossing the street against the light, throwing death stares at the motorists angrily honking their horns. At the store, the man looked up to see Anna marching through the doorway with all 4 boys in tow. She set her clenched fists on her hips and fixed her eyes on his. "Did you hit my boy?" The man didn't miss a beat. "Yes, I did." "Why?" "'Cause he was looking at me." Anna's fist balled tighter. "You see these boys," she said, sweeping her arm over their heads. "These here are my boys, and I'm the only one who hits them. You better not ever lay a finger on nan one of them ever again. Do you hear me?" The man's lips curled into a simpering smile. "And," she added, leaning in so close that he could smell the Pepsi-Cola on her breath, "if you do, I'll kill you." The man rolled his eyes and chuckled. "Get out of my store." Anna gave him one last long, fuming look and turned around. "Come on, boys," she commanded. The family filed out of the store. Maybe the proprietor had made a habit of slapping children without consequence. Maybe he had never had a woman threaten to kill him. Whatever the case, he He was, shall we say, perturbed, and before Anna could cross the street, he launched a 40-ounce bottle of Colt 45 at her back. It missed and shattered on the ground, wetting her legs. Stunned, she spun around and stared down at the broken glass and puddle of beer foaming at her feet. Her lips parted and then closed. She took a deep breath, glanced up at the sky, and then down at her terrified boys. Go home, get home now, she demanded in a calm and even voice. Go on, it's okay. The children scampered across the street but did not go into the apartment building as ordered. Instead, they huddled together in the courtyard to watch what happened next. Anna shoved her hands into her coat pockets and rocked back on her heels. Her eyes ranged across the front of the store. From the owner's vantage point, Anna seemed to be sizing it up. Just as he opened his mouth to holler at her, Anna's right hand rocketed from her pocket. In her hand was a snub-nosed 45. She aimed and fired. The man hit the floor, throwing his arms protectively around his head. After she emptied the magazine, she strolled across the street as if nothing at all had happened. Seeing the boys gaping at her, Anna said, "Didn't I tell y'all to take your black asses in the house?" The boys ran into the building and up the stairs. The man lay there for a long while, whimpering into the linoleum and squirming in his urine-soaked pants. When he finally summoned the courage to pull himself up off the floor, he saw that the windows were riddled with bullet pits. When I heard this story, I posed the same question I had after hearing the first story about my sweet Aunt Anna. Did someone call the cops? Did you?
I am very much struck by the recountings. You include of family stories that have become obviously legendary.
Yeah.
They feel integral to the telling of your own story, but they also feel like their own necessary spiritual endeavor. What do you hope your readers will take away from your ancestral stories, like the one you just read about your great aunt Anna?
Oh, that we all matter, that we all have stories that are worthy of telling, of sharing, of passing down. That our history in this country is important, right? That our history is a significant stitch in the fabric of this country, because I think oftentimes, especially non-white people, we are told that our stories don't matter, that we don't have any mystery. That might be a Freudian slip. That we don't have a history, or whatever history it is that we do have, it's not as important.
Yeah, I take a lot of meaning in that, and my mom is in the front row, and I just delight in the ways that she tells stories about our ancestors and our cousins and things like that. It makes family reunions, and we just went to a family funeral, unfortunately, but even in those kinds of moments, having those kind of family stories that we can share and bond over, they mean something, even when we're telling them at somebody's passing, and so I think that's a beautiful way, especially in a memoir. I think that's awesome that you included those in there.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I want to ask you about this term, angel sister. It resonated with me very deeply. I absolutely know that I have both academic and familial and angel sisters, and they guide and they protect me, and I am grateful for them. And I want to know, when was the first time you absolutely knew that a voice you heard was an angel sister?
So it wasn't the first time I became aware of an angel sisters. I wasn't calling them angel sisters at that point, right? I was calling them guardian angels. And it wasn't a voice, it was a smell, it was a scent. It was the most beautiful aroma, perfume I had ever inhaled in my life. And I just made the connection, because whenever I would smell it, I felt so safe and comforted. And then when I started writing, the voices that I would hear in my head were actually narrating stories, right? So I don't know how it works for other people when they write. I don't know if they hear their own voice in their head, like when you're reading. I don't know. But I have a chorus of voices in my head. I've also had people who have, I guess, I don't know, the third eye, like they can see auras. I've had people just staring at me and say, do you know how many colors you have around you? So, yeah, it's just been this like slow process that started at childhood, and now I'm completely obsessed with them. Alice Walker made this statement once at one of her events, and she was very upset. She was like, I don't understand why people don't lean on their ancestors. They're all around you. They're always there for you, and you don't speak to them. And I talk to them every day. Every day. So that's a long-winded answer.
Yeah, no. Yes, I did an Essence book project with Alice Walker a few years ago, and we absolutely had a conversation about ancestors. She was convinced that I share Emmett Till as an ancestor. I don't know about that, but she might have seen something that I haven't seen. So, she's awesome, and the way that she's able to tap into that kind of spiritual aspect of it and to really kind of pull things out. She saw these moments, by the way. That was my first kind of iteration. It was during the pandemic, and I was creatively shifting what I was doing with the Essence Book Project to interviews because the libraries were closed, and so the digital aspects of the project I just couldn't do, and so she saw that the interview that I did with her could open the door for us to have this kind of conversation.
Wonderful.
So I think you're absolutely spot on with your long-winded answers. So thank you. But I wanted to follow up with that to ask, how do you think others can begin to identify angel sisters in their own lives if they don't know that scent or that voice or that nudging or whatever it is, that kind of spiritual guidance is exactly that?
It's your intuition. We all have it. You feel it in your gut. Whenever I ignore that voice, that nudging, I end up in precarious situations. So I just pay attention. We don't know everything, right? And so it's always community, whether it's your physical community or whether it's your community of your angel sisters. Like we can't do it all ourselves, and we have to lean on something, some entity, someone.
Absolutely.
So just follow your intuition, and also, and I talk about this in the book, butterflies, we were raised to believe that was a good thing when you feel butterflies. And that's your alarm system notifying you this is not right. So change that thinking immediately.
Food for thought. Yeah. So I want to switch back to thinking about sugar and that kind of moment, that early 2000s moment, and really the time right before then. So you've lived a whole lifetime between today and when you first published Sugar. And yet you elect to end your memoir with how sugar was birthed into this world. So I'm very curious as to why you decided to end Firstborn Girls there.
Because had I written up until this point, it would be 800 pages. So, but there will be a second part, because so much happened between 2000 and 25 years.
Right.
So give me a few years. Give me a few years.
And then just as a follow-up, how did writing Sugar and The Warmest December, Loving Donovan, and more than a dozen more, I hope you guys have looked at her entire bibliography, it's incredible, more than 12 dozen other books, how did that prepare you to write Firstborn Girls?
So I've been writing about my family for my entire career under the guise of fiction. So if you are not familiar with my novels, if you are familiar with my novels, when you read my memoir, you're going to be like, I know that character, because I've always been writing about my family. They're so important to me, and their stories, they're the most interesting people I know, honestly. So it wasn't a great, or I don't want to say, it wasn't challenging to shift from writing fiction to nonfiction, because I wanted the memoir to read like a novel. So I use all of the elements of fiction. It's not just journalism, like these are the facts, right? So it wasn't a great challenge to make that shift.
That's awesome. Yeah, and I love all of the historical details in there. So I want to actually ask you about an authorial choice that you made. So why do you primarily refer to your mother as Vivian and other members of your family by their given names in your memoir?
Because when I first started writing, like the first draft, I was using the names that I call my parents, Mommy and Daddy. And I was like, that, it felt weird.
Okay.
They had to become characters. That was the choice to create distance. Yeah.
Yeah.
So now that's Vivian and Robert.
Yeah.
I know that they're my parents, but on the page, they're characters.
Okay. And then what do you want the audience, right? So that distance was for you, but what do you hope that the audience will gain, your readers, when they read those names? They hear those names if they're listening to the audiobook. What do you hope that they will gain by looking at those names on the page?
That they're not just Bernice's parents, that they are individual, flawed human beings, and it's okay. I want them also to be able to see themselves in my parents and my extended family members, and also see their family members.
Okay.
Because we all know a Robert, we all know a Vivian, we all know a Anna. So that's how I felt when I read The Color Purple, right? I read that book and I was like, I know every single one of these people. And I wanted to be able to replicate that for my readers. So I hope that when you read my novels, you're like, oh, these people are familiar.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. No, I love that. It was jarring at first because I did expect to hear Mama and Daddy, but once I got in the cadence of it, I said, "Oh, there's something really beautiful with the repetition of their names," and I think that it celebrates them as your ancestors in a really beautiful way.
Thank you.
Yeah. So it is tremendously clear, as a literary historian, the amount of historical and genealogical work that you had to do to write this memoir. I want to know why you elected to tell your story alongside educating readers, and please take a look at the historical grounding of this text and really pour into that. I want to know why you'd elected to do that specifically in this particular historical and cultural moment, and how did the moments in your life that were paralleling with the kind of cultural history that we were going through at that time, how did that feel writing that in this particular moment?
I don't think that there was any other way that this memoir could have been written, because I am a student of history. I'm so fascinated with, I could spend weeks and weeks and weeks just going down different rabbit holes. And I'm also concerned or obsessed with the erasure of history, right? So that's another thing. I'm like, let me get this down. Not just my story, right, but the story of America through the Black gaze. Let me tell you what my people went through.
Right.
While they were just trying to live and survive. Well, this is what was going on in the country. And also, I was like, oh, this little navel gazing. I'm just going to talk about myself. I didn't think my life was, I have an interesting life, but not as interesting. I don't think it's it holds that much interest to stand alone in a book. And I struggled a lot. This is another reason why the book was late. I struggled because I had already basically written my story in The Warmest December under the guise of fiction. So I was like, oh, I'm telling this story again. And my reader's going to be like, we already paid for this. Like, we're going to tell it again. And so I needed to, tie it up with something else.
Okay. I have to share this with you.
Yes.
And with you guys. So I am in a group chat text thread with some other alumni from my PhD program. I attended the W.E.B. Du Bois Department of Afro-American Studies at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. And we are proud Du Bois ladies. That's what we call ourselves. And there are two of us that teach African American literature, two of us that teach African American history. And one of the historians came to the group chat, and she was just so upset because she was talking to her students about lynching. And she opened her class that day and said, "What is a lynching?" The answers that she got back were very far from the definition of lynching. Oh. And it was very jarring for her because it felt like it was so far, that history felt so far away from her students that she just felt like she was in the Twilight Zone or something like that. Yeah. And I happened to be reading the passage where you give such a beautiful and full definition of lynching and what that meant personally to you in your life, and also what it meant to this country. And instead of replying, I just took a screenshot of that page.
Oh.
Yes. So thank you for helping the historians too.
Thank you. But you know what? I think that most people learn the history of this country once they get into college, if they take those classes. But I wasn't taught the real history of this country in grade school, middle school, or high school.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I have an English teacher for a mother who.
Yes.
So I got a leg up on a few people, but by and large, and even still, the classes that I took in college took the foundation that I had and just catapulted into something totally different, and just it is that. But I'm grateful that my friends were receptive to that, and they were like, I'm going to use this in class, and good. So yes, it was great. So my next question is back to Firstborn Girls, kind of pulling out. I'm a believer in the power of our tongues. So I elected to both read and listen to your memoir. The audiobook version is told by the incomparable narrator, Robin Miles. And if you get a chance to listen, I absolutely encourage you to do so, who beautifully captures so much meaning and texture in how she reads your words. I'm very curious to know, did you work with Robin at any point in the preparation of the audiobook? And what do you think or hope that the audio version of Firstborn Girls adds to what you wrote?
Yeah, Robin is amazing. We've worked together a few times, and if you ever we've never met in person. She lives right up in Harlem. But a conversation with Robin is like talking to 50,000 people because she literally jumps from dialect to dialect to dialect. It's just a part of her. She sent me an email asking the pronunciation of a few things, like especially when it came to the Bayesian clap songs. I think, I understand that people are doing like this immersion reading where they're reading along, and that's how I learned to read, right? Reading and listening. And so I think I'm gonna go back to that. She paints such a vivid, her voice paints such a vivid picture of every single scene in the book. It's like, if you close your eyes, it's like watching a movie. And so for those of us who don't have the time or have old, tired eyes and can't read books much anymore, listen to the audio. she's phenomenal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, she did a.
Mhm.
I cannot give a stronger endorsement for the audiobook. I hope that you will both take in the words on the page, because I do think that there is something to be gained at looking and holding a book.
Yeah.
Or, your Kindle reader, or however you access the text. But I also think that there is something very rich and deep about the way that Robin narrates it too. So.
And that's the only one that, the only narrator I trusted to do, because they wanted me to do it, and I was like, I can't do this. Like, it's too. I did the author note and I think the 2 author notes, and that was an hour and a half. It was so emotional.
Yeah.
So I was like, the whole book? No, I can't do that.
So then that actually brings up another question. There are so many kind of historical snapshots and family snapshots, and it almost very rich descriptions of what feels like you describing something that could be a picture. But you include just one picture in the book.
Yeah.
Why?
That was not my choice. That was the publisher.
Okay.
They were like, well, because I wanted the book to be filled with all these photos, and they were like, we're just going to use the one.
Okay.
Now, things might change when the paperback comes out. We'll see.
Yeah, I was going to ask, since we have the power of the internet and you have such a wonderful website, by the way, take a look at the Angel Sisters website. There's some really cool stuff there, and I was wondering if we could get some images there.
It's coming.
Okay.
It's coming. It's coming. Yeah, but what I've been doing is I've been posting photos on my Instagram and Facebook. In fact, yesterday would have been, had my father lived, would have been my parents' 60th wedding anniversary. So I posted the photo that I actually use when I'm describing their ceremony, about how my mother looks and how my father looks. And a reader left a comment, was like, I see the look that you're talking about, right? Because I said my mother's glowing. She was pregnant, but she's glowing. But my father looks very satisfied, like I got her.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah. I had to re-listen to that passage a few times, because the idea of feeling satisfied at a wedding, when, especially today in the kind of Instagram, photo ready world that we live in, we expect for the groom to be crying and kind of fawning over the bride. But this idea of being satisfied just really, I don't know, it arrested me in a way that I didn't, I wasn't sure if I was concerned or, yeah.
Supposed to be, you're supposed to be concerned. And I think that the name of that section is something like the leopard is always handsome before the kill. I don't know, something weird like that, but yes, it's something like that. But my father's, he's not happy, he's not sad, he's satisfied.
That actually leads very well to my next question. What do you say to those who find Firstborn Girls heavy to read or difficult to digest? What would you suggest they do, or to think, or how they should continue to read this book?
That is such a difficult question. I would never suggest that someone who is not ready to consume that type of literature, I would never force them to do that, right? I put down books all the time. Sometimes I'm not emotionally ready, right? Emotionally mature enough to read it. It took me 10 times to read Beloved.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
That's a
It took
difficult
me
one.
15 times to read Paradise. So it's not for everybody. I mean, I hope that people who find it difficult will just take a break, walk away, return to it. But I certainly wouldn't force anyone's hand.
Yeah, I Wrapped in Rainbows, the iconic biography of Zora Neale Hurston by Valerie Boyd, was one of those books that I had to keep coming back to. And it actually made the book have so much more meaning for me having to kind of grow. Like I had to take years in between reading that book.
Yeah.
But it stayed on my shelf, and when I was ready for it, it called to me.
That's the
and
way it works.
Yeah, I'm hoping that will be something that those who may, have to take a break, they find that this book helps them to grow and to find things in their lives in those interstices when they are not reading the book. But and those who are able to read it in one go, I hope that they will find that it is useful to come back to it. I think there's so many gems, and I think it's kind of one of those onions that you have to continue to peel back in layers. Yeah. So during last year's Essence Book Project interview with Terry McMillan, it became abundantly clear that the two of you are very, very close friends. And in the acknowledgments of Sugar, you thank Toni Morrison and Alice Walker, and you've talked so much about them in this conversation, for paving your way. By your fourth novel, Loving Donovan, Morrison was calling your writing searing and expertly imagined. And McMillan declared that you are a welcome voice in the literary world. How does it feel to write in community with other powerful Black women writers?
It's amazing. Like when I was writing Sugar, I was working at a resort company called Leading Hotels of America, and there was a Barnes and Nobles across the street, and every payday I was in that Barnes and Nobles, right? So I'm reading Walker, I'm reading Cooper, I'm reading Morrison. I'm trying to read Morrison. I'm trying. I had to grow into it, but I love her. And I remembered I read Disappearing Acts, which was Terry's second novel, and that's how I discovered her. And then 2 months later, the Blockbuster novel came out. Explosion. It's just like, oh my goodness, she could do it, I can do it. So I think that's the year when Terry, Morrison, and Alice were all on the New York Times bestsellers list at the same time.
It's a big deal.
I never imagined that I wanted to share the shelves with them. I hoped that I would share the shelves, and I eventually I would, but I'm like, I have Terry's telephone number, and we go out and have dinner, and we're friends, right? And several other authors that I admired, and it's community, and we talk about literature, but that's not the major thing that we talk about, because we're layered, right? We're not just writers, we're mothers, and we're sisters, and we're dreamers, and it's lovely. Yeah.
No, I was really struck when I interviewed co-authors and best friends Donna Grant and Virginia DeBerry, and they were talking about, they called it a class, that there was a kind of class of writers that were collected around the idea of the Essence bestsellers list, or the kind of Black Book Expos that were really popular in the 90s and early 2000s, a kind of fallout of the Oprah Winfrey Book Club, and that you guys were like friends, and you would see each other on your circuits when you would go to different bookstores and things like that to promote your work and those kinds of things, and it really kind of created this beautiful community where it wasn't just about writing and who had the next bestseller or the next blockbuster book, but it was about supporting each other.
Yes.
How has that community grown with you over the years?
So it's different now, right? We don't have as many events supporting Black writers as we did in the 90s, late 90s and early 2000s, but we gather online.
No.
Right? We support each other online.
Okay.
A lot of, and of course, when COVID happened, that really squashed things. So I think we're just kind of coming back around to that, but it's definitely lots of love, lots of love and support. Yeah.
That is a beautiful way to end our conversation, with lots and lots of love. Thank you so much.
Thank you.